evening, everyone. I am Pamela Ramcharan, and I welcome you to El Gabon News and Media special presentation, Budget Talks. Now, we are going to be talking about the budget that is coming up tomorrow. That's October 5th. It will be presented by Finance Minister Colm Imbert in the House of Representatives. Now, at this time, we will be joined by Dr. Roger Hosein, who is an economist and lecturer at the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus. We will be discussing the state of TNT's economy and how it has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Dr. Hosein will also weigh in on the upcoming budget and what he believes government should do to stimulate growth in the economy. At this time, I want to say welcome, Dr. Hosein.
Thank you very much for the invite, and I look forward to participating in your show and helping where I can to provide some answers.
All right, Dr. Hosein, we are going to get right into this discussion, and to give it a bit of context. Now, the central bank's July 2020 economic bulletin, it showed that there was an overall deficit. Now, a deficit, of course, expenses exceed the revenue. And it said that this was $10.7 billion during the first 9 months of the fiscal year 2019 to 2020. At the end of July 2020, the country's outstanding net public sector debt. Now, this, of course, is what the total outstanding debt could be bonds and securities of a country's central government. It's a source of resources for a government to finance public spending and also to fill holes in the budget. Now, this increased to $120.5 billion, which is 71.7% of GDP, from $103.2 billion in September 2019. The central bank also said that the country's deficit is projected to increase to $14.5 billion because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, because of these figures, Dr. Hosein, and I mean, these amounts, these monies, they are very large numbers. From this perspective, what is your position in terms of the state of TNT's economy, particularly at this time of COVID-19?
So at this point in time, we are in a very bad state. What I would add is that the COVID-19 just laid bare our economic soul. It was already in a trying situation, And if one were to look back to 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19, if there was any growth, it was at best very, very minimal. In fact, I look at the period 2008 to 2019 as a very sluggish period in the Trinidad and Tobago economic history. We produced about 4.4 billion barrels of oil and gas, and our economic growth contracted overall about 18%. So that's an amazingly badly managed economy, and this is before COVID. So we have to look at the COVID situation in context. And where we are right now is one in which 2020, according to Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Keith Rowley, 2020 could be minus 10%. So that's a sharp contraction. And if we were to look at a moderate 2% recovery from next year, it would take us until 2030 to get back to 2008. That's how bad this economy is at right now, in my judgment.
All right. Now, Dr. Hosein, and I mean, in terms of the sectors, because of course, many sectors would have been impacted, but the ones that were most impacted based on your research and in terms of you looking at what is going on in TNT, what were some of the sectors that were most impacted by this COVID-19, of course, and that slowdown in the economy?
Well, that's a very easy one in that all you have to look at is the sectors by which the government instructed must be closed. So the entertainment industry, for example, the cinemas, the restaurants, the bars, they are operating either directly closed or only partially open. And so their income would have taken a dramatic hit, and their workers would have, been left on the breadline in some cases. They will be given 1 day work, half-day work, very limited work for the month. And so those are the sectors that were very, very badly hit. Other sectors that involve a cross-border movement of natural persons. So, for example, anything to do with the tourism sector, which is heavily dependent on the movement of natural people from abroad into Trinidad and Tobago, those sectors would be heavily hit. So, I would say the tourism sector, the hospitality sector in general, were amongst the most heavily hit by COVID-19. But again, I have to be responsible and warn you and direct all the listeners that most importantly, before COVID-19 struck, the Trinidad and Tobago economy was already in a bad state. And so we not only have to deal with the structural fallout from COVID-19, but all the imbalances that existed before. And I can identify some for you. We have a decline in labor force participation rate, in that our labor force participation rate fell from about 63.4% around 2004 to 58.2% now. So that's a sharp fall. Our unemployment rate is on the rise. Our currency is overvalued. We are suffering from a shortage of foreign exchange in many regards. Our Heritage and Stabilization Fund only has about 6 billion, although we collected about 306 billion US, which is about 36 billion, 37, let's say 40 billion TT. Although we collected about 350 billion in energy revenues since 2000. So we basically spent out all the energy revenues, and we now have a debt close to 130 billion. So prior to COVID-19, we had a lot of structural problems in the economy. And what COVID-19 did is it enlarged the cracks in the economy and made it very visible to all. And where there weren't cracks, some more cracks appeared. So we now have a very shaky foundation as compared to 2019, although 2019 itself was one of a house that was shaky and needed reinforcement so as not to collapse.
All right. Now, Dr. Hosein, even as we are looking forward to what is coming, the budget that will be presented tomorrow. Now, your expectations for the budget. I read recently you would have done an interview previously where you would have listed out about 7 measures or so that government can put in place to get the economy back on track. Would you spend some time just to give us some details about those measures that you would have suggested?
Right. So again, I am a very simple economist. So I look at the economy in the following way. What is the problem? We have no growth. How do we fix it? We need to intervene and find areas that could generate growth. So the first thing I would say is we have some mature wells at Heritage. We should let Heritage get rid or farm out its 20% most mature wells to the lease out farm out program. So that way, and put a clause that it has to be brought on stream, say within 6 months. So within a 6 months period, we can bring some of the most mature wells owned by Heritage into productive use, generate employment, increase oil production, and generate foreign exchange. So that's one of the first things I would do. Another thing that I would do is I would try to talk to BHP Billiton and Samakal and perhaps Guardian Holding and get them to implement in Trinidad an arrangement similar to what BPTT has in Mayaro called MyPed, or Atlantic has in CJOS called LEND, microfinance agencies that leads to growth from the bottom up, something we call localized economic development. So I would try to promote and encourage that, and I would ask BHP to implement their program in Toko area. I would ask Shell to implement a program similar to MyPed in Muruga area, and I would perhaps ask Ansamahal to implement something in Northeast Tobago. These programs cost about 1 million US to start up, but they generate good localized economic development from the bottom up growth prospects, and that's something I would intervene and do. A third thing I would intervene and do is I would try to get within Trinidad and Tobago tourism going, because the borders are closed and it will probably be a while before people feel comfortable to cross the borders. So I would try to set up in Granville and in Mayaro something similar to Maracas, and try to get 5,000 people to come down to Granville in the southwest of Trinidad and to Mayaro in the southeast of Trinidad on a weekend. Uh, the the Trinidad tourism authorities would have to get involved. We would have to put in place facilities. We would have to encourage people with bacon shack outlets such as Richards in Maracas to, to branch out into other areas. But that way we could generate some more localized economic activity. Another thing I would do is I would go after the e-tech parks. Now, to me, the biggest development option within the next 3 years for the Trinidad and Tobago economy, in my judgment, is the e-tech parks. And any new parks we open must cater exclusively for the foreign market. No more import orientation, no more bringing in goods from China and the USA and distributing and using up our scarce foreign exchange. No. We encourage these firms to come. We already have an arrangement with the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate in the in California area in Trinidad, and we encourage the Chinese to bring firms to manufacture something here or produce something here or add some value here to send those goods back to the somewhere outside of Trinidad. So we generate foreign exchange either on value added or on a product that we manufacture here. And those are some of the things that I mentioned alongside, of course, agriculture, which in the context of insecurity right around the country in terms of the borders not being able to be crossed, except by Venezuelans, of course, I would encourage domestic food security. And although I speak of the Venezuelans and that they are still coming, and everyone knows that, I suggest to the powers that be that they find a formula, and it was in fact mentioned, I believe, in one of the manifestos. I think it's the PNM manifesto, seasonal work permits. I think the time is opportune to capitalize on these Venezuelan workers that have a superior work ethic. They are willing to work, they are hungry, they are interested, and put them to work in areas that either generate foreign exchange or save on the use of foreign exchange, with a win-win for them and a win-win for Trinidad and Tobago, and no further depletion of our foreign exchange because they either save foreign exchange or generate foreign exchange.
All right, now, Dr. Hosein, and something that you would have said there, and for people who would be looking on and they're wondering, what is Dr. Hosein saying? Does he mean that our locals, their ethics, their work ethics, because you mentioned that about the Venezuelans, and is that what you're saying at this point?
I am saying that comparatively speaking, if you look at the Global Competitiveness Index 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, you would see among the top 10 obstacles to doing business in Trinidad and Tobago is worker ethic. And it moved from about the fourth to the third to the second to the most problematic area or obstacle for doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. And when you are an immigrant and you go to a foreign country, you are hungry. The Venezuelans are back in Venezuela dependent on the immigrant workers here. They are hungry. And these people, they go out and work. They do work that Trinidad and Tobago nationals refuse to do. They go and they work in agricultural farms. They go and they do odd jobs, domestic jobs. And so their worker ethic is very much alive because they want to work. They have to work. A Trinidadian could always depend on a CPEP or some form of transfers and subsidies, or they can ask a neighbor or a friend. Not so for the Venezuelans. These people have to work very much, and you would know that, and all Trinidadians listening would know that, very much like when me or you go to Canada and we have to pick apple, or we have to go and work in two different jobs in Canada or in the USA to survive. It's the same logic that's now applicable to us. And so we should capitalize on that in a symbiotic way.
All right. And even as you were speaking about that, Dr. Hosein, and agriculture is a sector We hear time and time again, budget after budget, about diversification of the economy. Based on what you have just said there, do you think that the time is a good one for that diversification process to begin, to start to take place?
The time is a very bad time. Uh, Diversification should have started to take place since at least since 1956. The next best time would have been 1973. The next best time would have been 1999. All of those time periods we wasted. So the only remaining time is now. And so I urge policymakers not to waste another 20 years, not to continue to rely on our monocrop oil and gas, and to diversify the economy. You know, it's very heavy and very sad to see the state of the Trinidad and Tobago economy. It's broken. And I'm talking about before COVID. And now we have a golden opportunity by force to initiate change for the betterment of our people. And I urge the policymakers to go out there and let us make change for the benefit of our people. Let us diversify the economy. Let us shift the production possibilities in a manner and form that we increase the production of manufactured goods, export agricultural goods for the foreign market, services for the foreign market, and reduce the production of non-essential, non-tradable goods so that we could save on foreign exchange on the one hand, generate foreign exchange on the other hand, and in fact even change our consumption pattern in a manner and form that we eat more locally produced goods so that we could be in a position to not deplete our foreign exchange as quickly as it is depleted.
All right. Now, Dr. Hosein, you also would have went at length in telling us some of those measures that you would have, if you were there in that particular position, the things that you would have put in place. But what are you expecting to hear from the finance minister tomorrow when he presents that budget? What are some of the things that you think he will be coming with and, announcing to citizens?
I am hoping that the Minister of Finance comes out with all guns blazing. I am hoping he realizes some of the errors that was made in the last 5 years and he takes a direct front-on attack. He has the benefit of the Economic Recovery Roadmap Document 1 and Roadmap Document 2. And I read the Roadmap Document 2 and it looks very useful. And I am hoping to see widespread change in the manufacturing sector to improve manufacturing capacity utilization from about 62% to about 95%. Measures to improve the labor force participation rate, measures to improve non-energy export revenue earning, measures to improve production from lease-out, farm-out agreements. I am expecting to see a series of measures to help boost the Trinidad and Tobago economy from here onwards.
All right. And my final question, I wanted to find out from you your thoughts on something that the president of the Supermarkets Association of Trinidad and Tobago, Rajiv Dipti, said, that his suppliers had indicated possible price increases after the budget. Now we're looking at a time of COVID-19. People have lost their jobs, their income no longer getting an income, their days have been cut down. What are your thoughts on what the suppliers have hinted at?
One of the things I like about the Minister of Finance, because we don't always agree on everything. One of the things I like is he would speak out against something like that. And so I don't think now is a very good time to increase the price of basic items, but the prices of other items may have to increase. Take, for example, water rate. Whilst it is not specifically linked to the supermarket price increases you mentioned, it's another item that all people have to consume water. And if it is the water is heavily subsidized and the state cannot afford to pay for it, then we would have to find a system to raise the tariff on water, but at the same time give a voucher to the poor and most vulnerable. The same applies to electricity rate. If it is we simply cannot afford for NGC to subsidize the gas that goes to power generation, whilst our petrochemical sector has a lot of problems, then the state may have to consider a formula in which it removes the subsidy by NGC towards the NTEC, allow prices to adopt a more realistic level, and at the same point in time, for those who are most vulnerable, issue vouchers so that The poorest and most vulnerable is always protected, and the economy conducts itself and moves forward in a best a fashion as possible, but focused on more efficiency outcomes.
All right, and I did say that was my final question as you spoke about subsidies and so on. For there has been talk about removal of the gas subsidy. Is that something that you think that government should be considering at this time?
Well, I think they may be considering it. I think it's very possible. What I would say to you, even with the property tax, is things are very bad, and the government has to raise money somehow. They may not be able to raise the property tax in full measure, but they may have to do it in a layered way, and fair enough. But one thing the people of Trinidad and Tobago must become familiar with now is that the last 20 years was abnormal, and we were subsidized because, and that is abnormal. We are now going into what is called reality. And in reality, we have to remove some of these subsidies, transfers and subsidies, I think, is about 27 billion. We should find a way to bring that down to about 15 billion. Knock off a complete 12 billion and protect the poor and most vulnerable in the process. But we cannot afford this heavily subsidized lifestyle. We cannot afford this heavily import oriented lifestyle. And we have to start to adjust. We are in the middle of a bad situation, so we might as well adjust as we are adjusting right now. Start the process, however slow, and let us all work together, holding hands with one common objective in mind. We're building the Trinidad and Tobago economy and move forward. It's as simple as that to me, although it's I know it's very tough. It's not going to be easy, people. We would have to help one another. There will be those in our communities that would need a helping hand, sometimes a helping shoulder. We have to work it out together. But the reality is we are in a bad state. And we therefore now need to realize that the last 20 years was the abnormal period. The real period without subsidies is now going to set in. And so we need to come to terms with this new normal.
All right, and we will end our discussion at that point. We have to come to that realization, as Dr. Hosein said. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Hosein, for taking time out of your Sunday evening to join me for this discussion, just hours before the fiscal package is presented. Remember, it will be presented by Finance Minister Colm Imbert in the House of Representatives tomorrow. And again, thank you, Dr. Hosein. And I want to say thank you to all our viewers and listeners for joining us this evening for Budget Talks. I am your host, Pamela Ramcharan. Good evening.